Hi, and welcome. Welcome to a wonderful story. I am going to not only tell you the story, but I have the help of a tiny friend, the smallest one, and that's her name. Her name is Juju Su in Japanese, and means the smallest one. A wonderful story written by Jane Yolen. So I welcome you to join with me on this great story. And the only object I'm going to use to tell it, well, there's actually two, are something you out there might be familiar with because I thought it was the smallest one I could find to illustrate the story and kind of the most accessible. They are been around for about 70 years, this particular toy that is creative and lots of fun. It's called a Lego. They have certainly evolved as our time goes along. So picture in your head, if you don't have any with you, how little but how expressive that Lego is. And this is our character for today. Her name is, again, Juju Su. And the story was retold by Jane Yolen, fabulous storyteller, who has written over 400 books and is still going strong. So I thank her as I thank the Mentor Project every time I get to visit with you. The other character in our story is something called a kite. And I didn't make the most exciting kite for you. I took actually the illustration from Jane Yolen's wonderful book, The Emperor and the Kite. How appropriate, right? The kite, as it is referred to in our story, is made of sticks and string and a beautiful design. And as you know, what does it take to move a kite besides fast running? It takes the wind, a powerful, powerful nature piece, the wind. So you and I will tell this story together. If you happen to have a Lego around, pick up one of those characters. Doesn't matter who it is, but imagine, if you will, the smallest one, Juju Su, a story from Jane Yolen with beautiful illustrations by Ed Young, put and published together in 1967. For those of you who have a visual reference, this is our book, still available, highly recommended by me. And so this is how it goes. Once in ancient China, there lived a princess who was the fourth daughter of the emperor. She was very tiny. In fact, she was so tiny that her name was Juju Su, which means the smallest one. Because she was so tiny, she was not thought very much of, if she was ever thought of at all. Her brothers were all older and bigger and stronger than she, and they were thought of all the time. They were like four rising suns in the eyes of their father. They helped the emperor run the kingdom and taught the people the ways of peace. Good sons, stronger and bigger, and noticed by the emperor. Even her sisters, who were all older and bigger and stronger than she, were like three midnight moons in the eyes of their father. They were the ones who brought food to his table. But Su was like a tiny star in the emperor's sight. She was not even allowed to bring a grain of rice to the meal. So little was she thought of. In fact, she was so insignificant, the emperor often thought he often forgot he had a fourth daughter at all. And so, Juju Su ate by herself and talked to herself. And she played by herself, which was the loneliest thing of all. Her favorite toy, however, was a kite of paper and strings. Every morning, when the wind came from the east, past the rising sun, she flew her kite. And every evening, when the wind went to the west, past the setting sun, she flew her kite. Her kite was like a flower in the sky, and it was like a prayer in the wind. In fact, a monk who passed daily always gave her a blessing, a prayer. "The kite sails upward," said the monk, "mounting to the high heavens. My soul goes on wings." But then he was a monk and given to such thoughts. As for the Princess de Jussieu, she thanked him every day for his prayer, and then she went back to flying her kite. But all was not peaceful in the kingdom, just as the wind is not always peaceful. For the wind had troubled the waters of a still pond, and there were evil men plotting against the emperor. They crept up on him one day when he was alone, when his 4 sons were away, ruling in the farthermost points of the kingdom, and his 3 daughters were down in the garden. And only the Princess de Jussieu, so tiny she seemed part of the corner where she sat, saw what had happened. The evil men took the emperor to a tower in the middle of a wide, treeless plain. The tower had only a single window with an iron bar across. The plotters sealed the door with bricks and mortar once the emperor was inside. And then they rode back to the palace and declared that the emperor was dead. When the sons and daughters heard this, they all fled to a neighboring kingdom where they spent their time sobbing and sighing. They did nothing else all day long, all except de Jussieu. She was so tiny that the evil men did not notice her at all. So she crept to the edge of the wide, treeless plain, near the tower where her father was being held captive. And she built a hut of twigs and branches. Every day at dawn, and again at dark, she would walk across the plain to the tower. To the kite string, she tied a tiny basket filled with rice and poppy seed cakes, water chestnuts, and green tea. The kite pulled the basket high, high up in the air as the window in the tower. In this way, she kept her father alive. So they lived for many days, the emperor in his tower and the princess in a hut near the edge of the plain. The evil men ruled with their cruel, harsh ways, and the people of the country were very sad. One day, as the princess prepared a basket of food for her father, the old monk passed by her hut. She smiled at him, but he seemed not to see her. Yet as he passed, he repeated his prayer in a loud voice. He said, my kite sails upward, mounting to the high heavens. My emperor goes on wings." The princess started to thank him, but then she stopped. Something was different. The words were not quite right. "Stop," she called to the monk. But he kept going. He was a monk after all. And then de Jussieu really understood that the monk was telling her something really important, and she understood. Each day after that, when she was not bringing food to her father, she was very busy. She twined a string of grass and vines and wove in strands of her long hair. When her rope was as thick as her waist and as high as the tower, de Jussieu was ready. She attached the rope to the string of the kite and made her way across the treeless plain. When she reached the tower, she called to her father, "Father, father," but her voice was as tiny as she, and her words were lost in the wind. At last, though, the emperor looked out, and he saw his daughter flying her kite. He expected the tiny basket of food to sail up to his window, as he had done each day. But what should he see but the strand of vines and grass and long black hair? The wind was raging above, holding the kite in its steely grip, and the princess was below, holding tight to the end of the rope. And though the emperor had never really understood the worth of his tiniest daughter before, he did now. And he promised himself that if her plan worked, she and he would be together, and she would never, ever want for anything, though all she had ever wanted was love. And then he leaned further out of the tower window and grasped the heavy strand. He brought it into his tower room and loosened the string of the kite, and he set the kite free, saying, "Go to thy home in the sky, great kite." Whoosh! And the kite flew off towards the heavens. Then the emperor tied one end of the thick strand to the heavy iron bar across the window, and the other end stretched all the way down to Su's tiny hands. The emperor stepped to the windowsill, slipped under the iron bar, saluted the gods, and slid down the rope. His robes billowed behind him, and like wings of a bright kite. When his feet reached the ground, he knelt before his tiny daughter, and he touched the ground before her with his lips. And then he rose and he embraced her, and she almost disappeared in his arms. With his arm encircling her, the emperor said, "Come to thy home with me, dear child." At the palace, the emperor was greeted by wild and cheering crowds. The people were tired of the evil men, but they'd been afraid to act. With the emperor once again to guide them, they threw the plotters into prison. And when the other sons and daughters of the emperor heard of his return, they left off their sobbing and their sighing, and they returned home to welcome their father. But when they arrived, they were surprised to find Su on a tiny throne by their father's side. To the end of his days, the emperor ruled with Su so close by. She never wanted for anything, especially love. And the emperor never again neglected a person, whether great or small. And it is said that Su ruled after him as gentle as the wind, and in her loyalty as unwielding. And that, my friends, is a lesson for us all. No matter how great and no matter how small, to treat everyone with respect and love. I thank you, Jane Yolen and Ed Young, for the most incredible story that we can listen and learn to. I also, especially as Marilyn Price, part of the Mentor Project, would like to thank the mentors who helped so many people, and of course, the Mentor Project as a whole, and the interns and the wonderful staff that help put these programs together. That would be Jibby Jacobs and Tina Parker and Aiden Weinberger and my really good and dear friend Debbie Heiser. So if you like our programming, if you would like to hear more, please like us on Facebook, come to our website, and subscribe to this podcast. And I can guarantee you a good week, a week of good. And that,